that we're going to do this differently because I was given a CD that's 10 years outdated. So I'm going to make a confession. So what I first want to say is our very great privilege to have Ivan Pillay with us. I'm sure that you all would want to hear things that you are very curious about. Okay, but all right, then I'm just bring out whoopsie, what we are going to do, that I have ended up with an outdated CV. So I'm just saying it's a great privilege for us to have Ivan Pillay. We'll be telling you things that you certainly want to know, and I've had to ask him to introduce himself, which is probably going to be much better than if I did it.
Maybe half an hour to introduce you.
He needs a whole hour.
Okay, good afternoon. I'll do it in 2 or 3 minutes. Can you hear? You'll do it here. Okay, I'll do it in 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, I'm a political activist. I joined the African National Congress underground in 1974.
You need to stand back as the previous one. I stood back.
Okay. Standing next to a microphone there. That's what you do.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay. I had to go into exile in 1977. I returned in 91. Participated in CODESA, and then after the elections in 1994, I joined the National Intelligence, and then in 1999 I joined SARS, and I worked there until I resigned in 2014. That's it. I think that's in 2 minutes. I say here, this is not about tax policy.
I think you just move down because it's a very soft-spoken lecturer, and if you turn it up, it's going to sing. So please just move down a bit closer.
Okay, I'll try and speak up a bit more. This is not about tax policy, and the reason that it's not is that the problem that we have right now is not at the level of policy. It happens too often in government that people want to tinker with policy when the issue is really not one of policy. So this is not going to be about policy. Secondly, it's not going to be about what I personally experienced in the post-2014 era. This is not a personal story. I'm going to focus on what we did in SARS, what were the lessons, what we learned, and what could be useful going forward so that SARS could improve from where it is. That's simply what it is. Good move. The Nugent Commission, I hope some of you have read it. Have you? Okay. Nugent Commission is very, very clear. This is what it says. In the view of Judge Nugent, it's a premeditated takeover of SARS that happened in the 2014 period. There's the SARS of that period. There was intrigue, fear, suspicion, distrust, coordination broke down. The LBC was dismantled. The LBC is the large business unit. So let me just spend half a minute on it. Most advanced revenue services in the world have a large business center. It makes sense because most of your revenue flows to the revenue service from the large business centers. And South Africa is no exception. When we formed the large business center, we researched this, we visited other countries, and we built the model according to what was best at that time. Dismantling the LBC there's just no logic in it. It just made no sense at all. "200 senior employees exited, some forced out, some resigned. They didn't want to be part of Tom's SARS. Our crime-fighting capability was dismantled. And Nugent says the core function of SARS was compromised. The way I look at it from another point of view, and Nugent does talk about these things. In SARS, we talk about a higher purpose. I'll try to explain that now, and I'll come back to it. Minister Pravin Gordhan explained over and over again to management, to employees, that you are here to serve the country. We're here to build a new democracy. We're here to serve the nation. This is the higher purpose. I will make a reference to it later. That higher purpose ethic was destroyed. Accountability to the Minister of Finance was destroyed. And then the SARS management system broken down. Recruitment criteria totally ignored. And then performance management also broke down. The last point, a very important point, and Jacques Pau in his book makes the point that one of the objectives of what happened after 2014 was to break the enforcement capability of the South African Revenue Services, because by then, although small in number, it had the most coherent enforcement capability in the country. So the question is, what is to be done now? The great thing is that Tom Moyane is not there, that Judge Nugent has, in quick time, done his work excellently. He's presented a report. It's for the President to apply his mind to it. Before I go into what I think should be done, I want to spend a bit of time on what were our experiences, what we learned. With a few exceptions, what we learned, what we put in place in SARS, is not earth-shattering. We work closely with the leading revenue services, with Sweden, with Denmark, with the United States, with Canada, especially with Australia. Australia is one of the finest revenue services in the world. We took very, very seriously all our exchanges with them. We knew that we didn't know, and we learned very quickly. We'll go through that now. Just want to touch something just before we go into that, and that is that this is in the strategic plan of SARS 2013-14 to that period. For this plan would have had to be drafted in December 2012. Okay, this is a formal document. is presented in Parliament. Okay. This is what that document says. The first one is about the growing threat of the illicit economy. And the second one is about unfavorable public perception of poor state service delivery and corruption. Okay, so this is a state institution saying in 2012, saying to the whole of the state, guys, watch out. These things are going to affect tax compliance and customs compliance. Okay. All right, the core of SARS strategy. The first part is a higher purpose leadership. Leadership of integrity, a leadership which is prepared to learn, and a leadership that will lead from the front. The second one is voluntary compliance. Again, most revenue services would prefer a situation where compulsory enforcement is used in a very limited way. It would make sense that people would pay voluntarily. We'll come to how you do that. Then you must have an effective and an efficient operations system. And the last point is that if you create this efficient, effective system, it's run well, then you get people into the system. And you keep them in the system. This is not about policing individual South African citizens or South African residents or South African taxpayers. It is about putting a system in place that will do the work for you. Okay. The higher purpose, I said I'll come back to. This is a billboard put up at that time. This is an original slide. Our art of nation building. Help make the difference with your careers. At its height, we attracted a lot of people from the private sector. There was a time when it would be a huge boost to your CV to say you've worked in SARS for 3 or 4 or 5 years. For many years in SARS, our chief operating officer and the head of our IT was Barry Hall. Today, he is the CEO of the Discovery Bank. Okay, that's the caliber of people you're talking about. Some people came because of the reputation. Some people came because, really speaking, you can't really get an experience of tax administration outside the revenue service. Customs is even starkly clear. There's nowhere in South Africa you can actually learn about customs other than in SARS. So many people came because of the reputation that we were building, and many people came for the challenge, and many people came because they believed that we were trying to build something here that was worthy of supporting. All right, the compliance strategy. As I said, we didn't discover these things. We found them. We just tweaked them for our purposes, for our conditions. Okay, it says we need to explain to people about tax, about customs, why this has to be done. Secondly, it says, be fair, be efficient, and make it easy to do the right thing. And make it difficult to do the wrong thing. Okay? You would think that these are simple things that we should know. It makes common sense. Okay? But the trick is in that if you have imbibed this, is how do you apply it to everything you do? Now, only when you think you have done sufficiently on education and service should you apply the stick. But it must be a credible enforcement. It should be fair. This compliance approach is actually saying you don't have a one-size-fits-all. When somebody is willing to do the right thing, you try to make it very easy. But some people are trying, but they don't succeed. You help them. Those who don't want to comply, you show them that you will detect them. And those who have decided not to comply, then you must use the full force of the law. This, I can say, in the way we have formulated it, is new. What it is saying is that the populace must feel you. You must be present. Every segment of the population should know of you. They should see you. They should read of you. They should know of your actions. And that's a coverage model. How do you cover? And South Africa, because of so many so-called races, because of class strata, how do you make sure you cover all of that in a way in which one segment does not feel we are being punished or too much of money is being taken from us? So that's the coverage model. So that's breadth. The next part of that strategy is depth. And that's about how deep you can go. When you find repeated transgressions, you must be able to demonstrate that you can match that. Of those who are breaking the law. And that's not easy because you will never have the firepower that the sharp corporates have. You'll never have the number of chartered accountants that they have. A good illustration of this is the case with Mr. King, Dave King. It was a case that went on for 12 years. At its height, Mr. King had 6 senior counsel. And he had possibly a dozen chartered accountants. But we stayed with him through all its twists and turns. He flew the plane to try and hide it in France. We went there, we got the plane, and we auctioned it. He was here in Plettenberg Bay in his holiday home. We took control of the holiday home. Okay. In the end, we reached an agreement. And the matter was settled. But what we showed is we could match the capability of the best. So that's the depth part. The last point there is to say, use the depth, use the width, use your communication, use the media for a multiplying effect. So that's the enforcement model, enforcement strategy that we use. Right. Now, this is a very important thing. A lot of our woes in this country are because the thinking of a lot of our people is linear. It's event-driven, It is interventionist. It's not systems. And you have a good example just this past weekend when the government wants to buy tablets for students in schools, as if that will improve the education system. We've got to understand this as a system from end to end, and you must have a way in which you'll address all of that in its totality. And it takes time. There is no quick fix. Buying tablets will not solve that problem, and it took us in SARS about 10 years to succeed. Next. Okay, this too we learned in SARS. From our own experience and our exchange with consultants, we said that our organization in the main comprises of three capabilities. And that is an advisory stroke support capability, an enablement capability, and a delivery capability. I'm going to explain enablement to you. But first, let me ask a question. I'm not waiting for question time, just one question. I'm sure you've heard that South Africa has a huge implementation problem. Have you heard that? Have you heard that? Okay. All right. My view is it doesn't have a huge implementation problem. It has a huge enablement problem. Before you can implement something, you must design the solution well. You must do the planning well, do the resource allocation well. Then the implementation gets done. What this is saying is generally there is a part of the organization which you've got to reduce to standardized operations. The more standardized you get, the more efficient you can become, the more effective you can become. That's the delivery part. And there are people who like to work in the delivery part as employees because there's certainty. You come in at this time, you leave at that time. You have a tea break, you have a lunch break. It's standardized. The enablement part is a very creative part. These are the people that design systems, they design policy, they design procedures, manuals. And in a place like SARS, you would have every 2 weeks or 3 weeks a change either at the process level or at the IT level of continuous changes. So you have a good change protocol. And all of that comes from having that enablement capability. At its height, we had about 250 people in that capacity out of 14,000 employees. Many of them, not all of them, many of them are engineers. They are that type of people. Although we were using them in a SARS environment, but these are the people who plan well. So you'll see later, accordingly, it's a very intricate drawing, but that's the way we organized our operating model. We said there's an advisory part. Yeah, all right, go there. There's an advisory part and support part. There's a delivery part. And there's an enablement part. Okay? Okay, here we're coming back to what we call higher purpose. Okay, that's a competency model, leadership model. And SARS placed a heavy emphasis on the values and recurrent behavior required of people. What's the repeated pattern of behavior? Not the behavior that happens once in a while, but what does a person do day in, day out? And there are not foolproof ways, you're dealing with human beings, nothing is foolproof, but there are ways in which you can put people through tests, you can put people through interviews, and you can come closer to selecting the right people. Okay. This is in about 2007, 2008. So SARS, we carried out every year something called an employee engagement survey, carried out by an external party. Out of our 14,000 employees, about 11,000 used to participate in it. So that's a huge sample. And that's the sort of scores that we got. Go to the next one. So year by year, you try and measure. And in 2007 to 2008, we moved up 4.8%. The first point here is a point that was very difficult with us in the beginning. Because we tried to solve, because of our enthusiasm, we tried to solve every problem. We tried to deal with everything. And it is impossible. You can't behave like a gatekeeper. You've got to arrive at risk management. What's the best way? What's the biggest risks? How do we deal with this in the most effective and efficient ways? The next point is again about individuals, about people. What drives people? And we found that usually, sorry, just go back. Usually it's power, affinity, or the accomplishment or execution. These are the three. We also found that it's difficult for some South Africans to be managers because they have a too high level, affinity level. They like people and they like people to like them. Difficult to make the hard decisions. The next point. Before any big IT change, fix your processes, bed them down, then make IT changes. It's very simple, is that change is a complicated thing. And if you have change on change that's not bedded down, you have a huge complication. So we worked from 1999 to 2000 and roughly 6 without making any big IT changes. We made small IT changes. We made the big IT changes from 2007 onwards. Okay, the last thing on this slide is decision making. It's sad to say, much of our society doesn't make decisions based on facts, on data. We make it on suppositions. Sometimes it's magical thinking. Now, in an institution like SARS, especially when we had the IT working very well, it's a data-rich environment. You can make your decisions on the basis of data. You will find that in many state institutions that you will have the first 4 layers or 3 layers of management are all general managers. It's a huge problem. You have general manager reporting to a general manager, reporting to a general manager, reporting to a general manager. And people with domain experience and functional experience are operating at too low a level. What we put in place in SARS was that at the third level, you've got to be a domain specialist or functional specialist. Manager. What we also encouraged is a specialist line. So you have people who don't want to be managers, but they're technical people and they're very good at their job. So you create a parallel career path so that you can keep your technical people with you. Standardization I've touched on already. The second bullet point, vertical management and peer management. It's not too difficult to be a manager, a vertical manager over 6, 7 people, or even 15 people. But in complex organizations, you actually have to manage people that are not in a vertical relationship with you. Very often you have to manage people who are on your level, or sometimes who are above you. All right, so that's complexity in modern organizations. Then the last point, which for me was a difficult thing to learn, to accept, because we wanted to change the world, is that at a certain stage, when you're looking for continuous improvement in productivity, you need stability. You need change, but change must be in a stable environment, according to change protocol. Okay. Right, let me stop there. My intention is that in tomorrow's talk, we'll deal with, all right, what is to be done. So, I just want to stop at that point. We can go back to a few slides if you want to see something which you want want me to clarify for you. But that's the lessons that come from our period in SARS. I'm sorry, it's not a narrative. It's more at the level of models, tools that we used. But these things are known in SARS. The records are there. Some of the people are still there. It can be done.
Are there enough people in SARS now to bring it back on track within a reasonable period? They may not be at a high enough level in SARS. Look, 200 of its most senior people left. And there are another few hundreds that have been sidelined. These are managers that have been just put on the side, and other people have been brought in. So there is a core there. I think they will have to bring some people from the outside. That is, some of the people that were pushed out, but even new people. The way government is right now, I actually think there should be a call to the private sector to say, come in and join with us, help us fix. I don't think it can fix it entirely on its own. I mean, in order to build SARS to what it was, we had somebody like Barry Hall. We had somebody like Opa Magashula. Opa came from Telkom. Barry came from First National at that stage. But how can you be competitive salary-wise?
Well, we were competitive salary-wise. And actually, the past regime of SARS is actually paying its leaders even more. Okay.
But fortunately, SARS is a state institution, but it's not regarded as a department. So it has greater leeway in making arrangements about salary and so on. So there is some room there.
How long will it, do you think it will take to restore SARS to its previous state?
Okay, so the first thing is that, and I wanted to deal with that tomorrow, but we'll deal with it now. The first thing is to stabilize the institution. And in my view, that might take 6 months to a year to stabilize it. And then after that, you do some serious fixing, and I reckon in about 3 years, we could be there. But a big mistake, I'll repeat that tomorrow, a big mistake would be to go in all arms and legs and try to fix things. That's going to lead to a bigger problem. Sorry, sir. Did you want to say something? No?
I'd like to, which is about transfer pricing.
Yes.
Did you look at that in terms of the large business sector?
Yes.
The allegations, if you like, in the Kofi Annan report is vast amounts of money being moved out by mining companies on the multinationals out of Africa and out of South Africa. Is this something you looked at, or do you believe it isn't happening?
No.
Talking about when you were in charge
Sure.
in 2002.
Yeah. No, we looked at it. So there are a number of things to fix when it comes to transfer pricing. You've got to fix the legislation. You've got to fix the international agreements. You've got to bring people into the institution who've got the expertise. Now, it's not only the tax expertise or the customs expertise, but sometimes it's the expertise of the economic sector. So if it's mining, it's a huge advantage to know something about mining. Okay. So we were building the capacity. So one of the things the LBC had, it had client relationship managers for these big sectors. The two biggest sectors that we focused on was mining and the banks. As a judge, which judge is this now? Davis. Judge Davis cites examples of during that period when huge payments were made to SARS because of transfer pricing breaches. But that now has not been followed through, and in fact it's dismantled. So almost every transfer pricing expert has gone. So it has to be built from scratch. Then the last thing I want to say about this is that the transfer pricing area, all of these people will tell you, it's not a clear-cut thing. You cannot say clearly that it's A or B or C. It requires quite a careful examination. It takes a lot of time. And the thing is that you must be in the game. We are not even in the game now. Yes.
It seems to me that the one big question that the Nugent Commission didn't resolve is the purpose of this capture of SARS. I mean, it can only really be for one of two reasons, or both of them. Either to obfuscate certain people's tax returns, to cover up certain people's tax returns, or to cover up the sources of their income. And it seems to me that we really haven't got to the bottom of those two big sort of elephants in the room there in these commissions. I mean, because of the adage that you're not allowed to we're ever going to get to the bottom of why they, this deliberate plan to capture SARS. What was its intention?
Okay, so when we discuss tomorrow, I do deal with that. I think that, and Nugent touches on it too, is that you should now have, because Nugent actually put an architecture in place. So he looked at it overall. So I think we need a separate independent body to look at all settlements that took place during this period. It should be independent, they should look at it, they should be given the full powers to look at it and not be told that, listen, you're not an employee of SARS, you can't do this. There are ways to get through that. And let them look at it. Because Nugent itself was 4 or 5 months. There was no way he was going to dig into the detail. In fact, one of Nugent's recommendations is that the commission be retained in some way by the president. So certainly people are aware of that. But for me to go a little bit higher now, look, I think the one thing is that that featured highly in the minds of the perpetrators of this is that SARS was not under their control. It was independent. And it did have a strong enforcement capability, far stronger than our numbers. And we were getting close to some people, and some people we had taken to the cleaners, like Robert Wang, said to be very close to the president. He's got to pay SARS something like 1.2 billion rands. Okay. And there are a number of people like that who were quite close to the people in power. And SARS was not an institution you could say, do this, do that, do that. We took our mandate very seriously. We took our independence very seriously. So that's the one problem. They could never be sure of us. I mean, I went to the president to raise the issue that he had meetings with gangsters. He met with gangsters in Cape Town and he met with gangsters in Durban. I raised with the president that he met with gangsters in Cape Town and in Durban. Because when these things become, we become aware of them, we have to raise it and say, listen, here is this is, happened. And he didn't deny it. Okay, so we had an independence. I think that's the one. I think the other thing that we were making too many people around the president uncomfortable because we were looking at them would have been the obvious one. Then to cut some sweetheart deals, I think that's also. I mean, one of your fellow Cape Townians, what's his name? Liffman.
Yeah.
SARS hasn't collected something like 300 million since 2014, since we left SARS. And in fact, certain SARS people have been trying to find ways to snooker that debt.
What do you estimate the size of the uncollected taxes from these large business organizations and the president and others?
I no longer have the means. We'll have to set up some teams. We'll have to do that. But what happens is that if you follow the Nugent Commission, there's a guy, Tabelo Malovele, who gave evidence. He was the head of a unit called the Compliance Unit. What they did was to measure things like this. So by looking at registrations,
by looking at filing, by looking at payments. What percentage of your payments are on time? What percentage of your payments are accurate? By looking at things like that, you begin to measure compliance. And it's always been my philosophy, and I'll touch on it tomorrow, that if you do all these things well, you will get the output. It's a mistake to rush to the output because you actually break everything else when you rush to the output. So if we are consistent and we do this thing day in, day out, like we did in SARS for many, many years, collecting the revenue, it just came out, it just pumped out because the machine worked well. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if you could talk about whether you think there'll be a problem with voluntary compliance, because my understanding is that after '94, people were very enthusiastic about supporting this government after feeling like it was a virtue to actually try to
Sure.
defeat the apartheid government of their taxes. And now with all these perceptions of corruption, do you think that will be an issue?
Yes, so just there was that slide in the very beginning, it's the third or fourth slide. Risks, right in the very beginning. Okay, so as I said, that's about December 2012. Okay, so obviously the situation now is much worse. So it's an uphill battle. Now, you know, with everything, it's a small number of people who do the right thing out of having the right values and the right behavior. It's a small number of people. You also have a small number of people who always do the wrong thing, by the way. And the bulk of the people are in the middle. So it's up to the people who think they have the right values of how you work with others to get into a situation where you can put these planks in place. So after the early acceptors, you'll get the next 15%, the next 20%, and you keep working at it. Most people, the people in the middle, if you are truthful, if you are transparent, you are consistent, they will see, they will understand, they will follow, they will participate. That's how most people are. But once you break it, then of course, they'll see the lead from other people. They'll even follow the other people doing the wrong thing. Yes?
Do you think that SARS has the capability to tackle these almost criminal elements like the illicit tobacco trade, this illicit gold trade, and all these other evils that have crept in and actually undermining SARS collections quite seriously, especially the tobacco trade,
Sure.
about often, because you're dealing with criminals.
Yeah. Yes. So, again, this is saying we are dependent on the law enforcement system. Okay. In the period from about 2010, 2011, 2012, we were doing more than what we should be doing because of the failures in the law enforcement system. Because the failures were already apparent. We did our own criminal investigations. We used to go to the police and say, we want to open a docket, here's the complaint. They would open the docket, we would go and do the investigation. When you need affidavits, you go back to the policeman and say, we need this affidavit. They sit with you, interview whoever it is, you drop the affidavit. We do the whole case, we take it to them and say, here's the case. Okay? But we're still dependent on them for the next steps, and then we're still dependent on the prosecution. Okay? So, it is not possible to have excellence in one place. It is impossible, because eventually the walls will crumble. So this cannot be about rebuilding SARS only. It's about how do we build public administration in the country. Right? It's not possible. It's too expensive, and in the end it will fail. Yes?
Okay, I've said it, I'll repeat it. Only a small number of people in most organizations, only a small number of people act out of a set of the right values. If the small number of people get into a situation where they are able to get more supporters and they can design a system that others can follow, they'll get a lot of people to follow them. But the opposite also applies. It's a small number of people with the wrong values can do the same. Okay. Now, unfortunately for us, because we're young at democracy, we don't have 200 years, 300 years of experience. We don't have strong institutions. But just for that matter, just think about the United States, which we think of as a strong democracy. Just look at what one idiot is doing. Okay, can we close up shop for today? All right, thank you. Did it go well?